There was a window between alarm and classification, between the moment a family got scared and the moment a department started looking. No protocol covered that gap. No law said protect the house now. The scene sat open, and what the house knew no one ever recovered. The Springfield 3. The chest of drawers was not finished. It sat in Sherrill Levitt's bedroom at 1717 East Delmar Street, partially painted, the varnish not yet dry. She had been working on it the night before. At 11:15 in the evening, she was on the phone with a friend talking about the color, the wood, how she wanted the room to look when it was done. The house was new. She had bought it in April, just 2 months before. She and her daughter Suzie had moved in together that spring. Since then, Sherrill had spent every free hour making it hers. A wood privacy fence along the east boundary, fresh paint in the rooms, small improvements, one weekend at a time. A woman remaking a home at 47 with her own hands and her own time. She had a doctor's appointment on Monday. Across Springfield, her daughter was at a party. Suzie Streeter, 19 years old, had graduated from Kickapoo High School that afternoon. The ceremony was at Missouri State University's Hammond Student Center. Sherrill had been there watching her daughter walk across the stage. Afterward, the two of them came home and ate pizza together. Takeout, early evening, the quiet of a house after a long day. Then Suzie went out. She and her best friend, Stacy McCall, had graduation parties to get to. Sherrill stayed home. She picked up the phone and called a friend, and she talked about the chest of drawers. Stacy McCall was 18. She had a dimple in the middle of her chin and freckles on her face. By every account of the people who knew her, she was the kind of person who talked to everyone at a party. At around 10:30 that night, she called her mother, Janice, to change her plans. No hotel in Branson tonight, too much going on. She'd stay at her friend Janelle's instead. That call was the last time Janice McCall spoke to her daughter. By 2 o'clock in the morning, the party had been broken up by police. Too loud, too late. Suzie and Stacy said their goodnights. Janelle's house was too crowded. Her family was in from out of town, so the two friends decided to go to Suzie's instead. Suzie had been wanting to show Stacy the new waterbed that had just been delivered to her room. They drove separately. Suzie led the way in her own car, personalized plate Suite IR. They are believed to have arrived at 1717 East Delmar at around 2:15 in the morning. That is where the confirmed record ends. What was found the next day? 3 cars in the driveway and carport, arranged as they normally would be. 3 purses, lined up in Suzanne's bedroom, each containing cash, identification, cigarettes, car keys, graduation clothes, set aside. Sherrill's bed, slept in. A window blind in her bedroom, slightly open and bent at an awkward angle as if someone had moved it to look outside. A graduation cake in the refrigerator, Suzie's name on it. Cinnamon, the Yorkshire Terrier, alone in the house and agitated. And on the front porch, the glass globe of the porch light, broken. The bulb itself was intact. Only the globe had shattered. And by the time police documented the scene, the glass had already been swept away. Sherrill Levitt was born on November 1st, 1944 in Los Angeles. She grew up in the Pacific Northwest in Bellevue, Washington, where her family spent weekends camping. She married in her 20s, had 2 children, Bart, and then Suzie. Born in 1973, she divorced not long after Suzie arrived. She remarried in 1980, moved from Seattle to Springfield, Missouri, and began building a life in a city that was not her first home. She divorced again in 1989. By 1992, she had been a single mother for years. She had made it work methodically, without complaint, in the way that people who have rebuilt more than once learn to do. She was a cosmetologist at New Attitudes Hair Salon on West Sunshine Street. The salon considered her a model employee. She had more than 250 clients. That number is not incidental. It means she was known in Springfield, trusted in the particular intimate way that a hairstylist is trusted, with people's time, their news, their private hours. She knew the city through those 250 people the way a city reveals itself slowly, from the inside. The house on East Delmar was the first she had ever owned. She had bought it in April 1992. In the 2 months since, she had installed a fence, begun renovating the interior, and found the chest of drawers she was going to refinish for her bedroom. Her former stepdaughter, Melinda Unger, later described Sherrill's housekeeping to reporters with a specific detail. If Sherrill left her gardening sandals on the back step, they would be there for a day at most. She kept things in order. The bedroom she was making over was a room she had plans for. Suzie Streeter. Suzie had been born in Seattle and moved to Springfield at 6 years old. She was close to her mother, closely, in the way daughters often are in single-parent homes where the bond carries extra weight. She had some difficulty in school. Friends and family noted she may have been dyslexic. She attended classes for students with learning differences, but she had graduated, and she had a plan. She was going to follow her mother into cosmetology. She was working at a local movie theater in the meantime, figuring out the next step. She had a scar on her right forearm. Her left ear was pierced twice. Her personalized license plate announced her the way 19-year-olds announce themselves with a little humor, a little pride. Sweetie-er. Stacy McCall had grown up in Springfield, the youngest of 3 children. She and Suzie had been close since childhood. She worked at the Springfield Gymnastics Center. She was scheduled back on Monday, June 8th. Her parents, Janice and Stuart, knew her the way parents know a youngest child who has always been easy to read. When Stacy called home at 10:30 to say her plans had changed, Janice was not alarmed. Her daughter was 18. It was graduation weekend. Plans change. By morning, none of them were there. The window of disappearance, as established by the FBI and the Springfield Police Department, is between 2:15 and 7:30 in the morning on June 7, 1992. The lower bound is the last confirmed sighting of Suzie and Stacy leaving the party. The upper bound is the approximate time the house was first approached by friends who found no one there. What happened inside that window, inside that house, is unknown. There was no confirmed evidence of a struggle. There was no forced entry. The front door was unlocked. The broken porch light is the only physical detail that suggests something happened outside. The globe was shattered, not cracked, not fallen. The light bulb was undamaged. Over the years, investigators considered 2 possibilities. The globe was broken during an abduction as someone moved, or was moved, through the entrance, or it was broken deliberately beforehand to darken the porch. Neither has ever been confirmed. And the glass, which might have indicated something about the angle and force of the break, was swept from the porch on the afternoon of June 7th. Janelle Kirby's boyfriend had come to check on his girlfriend's missing friends. Janelle was barefoot. He didn't want her to cut herself. He was not thinking about evidence. There was no reason yet to think about evidence. According to a press conference given by Captain Tony Glenn on June 10, 1992, a convenience store clerk at the A-Mart reported seeing a woman matching Sherrill Levitt's description at approximately 2:15 that morning. She entered the store hurriedly, only partway through the door, and asked the clerk whether he had seen her daughter and 2 friends. She appeared rushed. She left quickly. If the sighting is accurate, Sherrill was outside and searching at the exact moment Suzie and Stacy were driving toward home. What would cause a mother to leave her house at 2:15 in the morning looking for her daughter whose plans she knew had changed? Who she expected to arrive shortly? Captain Glenn posed that question publicly on June 10, 1992. It has never been answered. The sighting has never been confirmed, disputed, or explained. It is a documented detail in the investigative record, and it is the kind of detail that opens questions that cannot be closed. The answering machine held a message. Janice McCall was among the first people to reach the house that afternoon. After she called the police to report the women missing, she checked the machine. She heard something. She described it as a strange message. Then the machine, as answering machines of that era commonly did, erase the recording when the tape finished playing. Police said they were, in their words, very interested in the message. They believed it may have contained a clue. They did not believe it was connected to the phone calls Janelle Kirby had answered earlier that day while at the house. Those calls, 2 of them, from an unidentified male, were crude and without identification. Janelle described them to investigators. The SPD's David Asher later summarized them as profane, with the caller refusing to identify himself. The phone line at 1717 East Delmar was new and unlisted. Suzie had complained about prank calls since moving in. Whether those calls and the erased message were connected to the disappearance or connected to each other has never been established. What is established is this: the message is gone, the glass is gone, and the house from mid-afternoon of June 7th onward was a scene from which 10 to 20 people had come and gone, touching surfaces, washing cups, emptying ashtrays, moving through rooms where 3 women had been and were no longer. Springfield police were officially notified at approximately 9 o'clock in the evening on June 7, 1992. That notification came nearly a full day after the last confirmed sighting of any of the 3 women. In the hours between 2:15 in the morning and 9 o'clock at night, the house at 1717 East Delmar Street was not a crime scene. It was not legally classified as anything. It was a house where women were not present, and the people who loved them came and went through the unlocked front door, trying to understand why. There was no formal protocol in Springfield in 1992 that required the home of a missing adult to be secured from the moment of alarm. The widespread cultural assumption at the time was that police would not act on an adult's disappearance for at least a day. Criminologists have consistently described this so-called rule as a myth, not a written policy. Never a formal standard, but the myth was pervasive, and its consequence was real. Families who discovered an unexplained absence did not call police immediately. They did not know they could, or they called and were not met with urgency. And while they waited while they hoped they went to the house, they cared for it the way people care for a place when they are frightened and helpless and need to do something with their hands. Officer Rick Bookout arrived to find several people in the yard. The front door was open. People were moving freely in and out. "When I arrived," he later said, "the first thing I noticed were several people in the yard. The door was open and people were coming and going from inside the house. The answering machine had already been played. The glass had already been swept. By police estimates, 10 to 20 people had passed through the rooms of a potential crime scene before a single officer secured it." Within 2 days, the FBI had joined the investigation. The scale was understood immediately. Sherrill Levitt had 250 clients. Suzie and Stacy had been at parties where, by Captain Glenn's account, 100 or more people attended each. "We're trying to interview every single one of all those people," Glenn told reporters, "plus anyone else who knows anything." Investigators polygraphed people close to the women. Suzie's estranged brother Bart cooperated with police and passed. Suzie's ex-boyfriend, Dustin Rikla, who had months earlier broken into a local mausoleum and stolen gold fillings, passed a polygraph in June 1992. He testified before a grand jury in 1994. He was never charged in connection with the disappearance. According to accounts documented close to the investigation, the inquiry was structured in a top-down manner, managed by officials with the least direct familiarity with the physical evidence, rather than built from what the scene itself had produced. In an unusual decision, the Springfield Police Department also granted the producers of 48 Hours close access to the active investigation. What that access cost in terms of investigative integrity is not documented. The searches accumulated over the years and produced nothing confirmable. In 1993, investigators combed 40 acres in Webster County's land connected to a prior missing persons case, tipped as a possible disposal site. They found nothing. In April 2003, excavation of farmland south of Cassville turned up what appeared to be blood. It was sent to a specialized lab, tested extensively, and returned inconclusive. The excavation also produced a fragment consistent with descriptions of a green van, a vehicle witnesses had reported seeing in 1992. That fragment was also inconclusive. In 2004, per reporting by the Springfield News Leader, A DNA sample central to the ongoing investigation was destroyed during the testing process. Results were inconclusive. The sample was gone. On December 31, 1992, while the case was being featured on America's Most Wanted, a man called the show's tip hotline. Police would later state that this caller appeared to have prime knowledge of the abductions. He had information that, in the department's assessment, went beyond what was publicly known. A switchboard operator attempted to transfer the call to Springfield investigators. The line disconnected. Police went public with an appeal. They described the caller. They asked him to come forward. He never did. The case's most credible outside lead was lost in the mechanics of a phone transfer on New Year's Eve. In 1995, the Missouri Violent Crime Support Unit reviewed the complete case files. A group of veteran detectives examined the evidence and reached the same conclusions the original investigators had reached. Close to 30 leads were identified for re-examination. The review confirmed the investigation's findings. It could not give back the first 19 hours. In 1997, 5 years after the women vanished, a probate court declared Sherrill Levitt and Suzie Streeter legally dead. Their case files remained and remain today officially listed as missing. Janice McCall did not petition to have Stacy declared dead. She has not done so in the 33 years since. Her position has been consistent and precise. Until I know 100% that Stacy is deceased, I will never declare her dead. They're going to have to find some remains somewhere before I call her legally dead. That is not denial. It is a refusal to let a legal instrument substitute for a fact. Courts can declare a person dead when the evidence of life has been absent long enough. They cannot tell a mother what happened to her child. Janice McCall has known that distinction for 3 decades. She has held the line. The $43,000 reward has never been claimed. More than 5,000 tips have been received by the Springfield Police Department over 3 decades. None has produced an arrest. The case has been examined on 48 hours, featured on America's Most Wanted, reviewed by the FBI, the Missouri State Highway Patrol, the Missouri Violent Crime Support Unit, and a grand jury convened in 1994. The grand jury returned no indictment. The name most frequently associated with the case in the public record is Robert Craig Cox. In 1992, Cox was living in Springfield working as an underground utilities worker, a profession that gave him routine access to residential properties. He had previously been convicted of murder in Florida. That conviction was later overturned by the Florida Supreme Court. He was, at some point, employed at the same car dealership as Stacy McCall's father. Stacy and her sisters sometimes visited their father at work. Cox was interviewed by Springfield police in 1992. He told them he had been at church with his girlfriend on the morning of June 7th. His girlfriend confirmed the account. She later recanted. She told investigators Cox had asked her to say it. Cox was convicted of aggravated robbery and kidnapping in Texas in 1995 and sentenced to life. While imprisoned, he told a Springfield News Leader reporter in 1997 that he knew the 3 women were dead. He said their bodies would never be recovered. He declined to say where. He declined to say anything more. At various points across the years, he told investigators he would disclose what he knew after his mother died. His mother died. He disclosed nothing. Police have consistently stated they do not consider Cox credible. He has never been charged in connection with the disappearance of Sherrill Levitt, Suzie Streeter, or Stacy McCall. No one has. Former SPD Detective Mark Webb, who worked the case and later became police chief in Bolivar, Missouri, has spoken about what it left behind. "Is there something more we could have done?" he said. "Is there another question we could have asked? Was that person lying to us?" He also said the case changed how local authorities approach missing persons. It prompted a search for new tools, new procedures, new ways of managing a case of that scale. What specific changes were made, what protocols were formally adopted or revised is not documented in the public record. The acknowledgement is there. The record of action is not. Here is what the fracture is. In the early morning hours of June 7, 1992, 3 women disappeared from a house in Springfield, Missouri. At the moment they disappeared, no system required that house to be protected as evidence. No protocol governed the gap between alarm and classification between the moment a family became worried and the moment a department opened a formal investigation. Because that gap existed, the house sat open. Because the house sat open, people came through it. Because people came through it, glass was swept, cups were washed, surfaces were touched, and a recording was played and erased by a woman so frightened for her daughter that cassette tape was the last thing on her mind. None of those people did anything wrong. They were not obstructing an investigation that had not yet begun. They were in a house they were allowed to enter, doing what frightened people do. The fracture was the gap itself, the absence of a standard that would have said when 3 people are unaccountably absent when their cars are in the driveway, their purses are on the floor, their dog is alone and agitated, this house is evidence. Protect it now, not after classification, not after a waiting period, now. That standard did not exist in Springfield in 1992. It did not exist in most American jurisdictions. Missing adults, especially when there was no obvious sign of violence, were not emergencies in the operational sense that activates evidence protocols. They were a category beneath the threshold, and the threshold had a cost. In this case, the cost was measured in a porch light globe swept into a dustpan. An answering machine played once and gone, and whatever was in that house on East Delmar Street that might have told investigators something true. 33 years later, the house itself is gone. It was demolished years after the women disappeared. The land is there. The address is in the records. The 3 women are officially still missing. Sherrill Levitt was on the phone at 11:15 the night before, talking about paint and varnish and a chest of drawers she was refinishing for her new bedroom. The house was 2 months old. She had a doctor's appointment on Monday. Somewhere between 2:15 and 7:30 in the morning, something happened that no record has ever captured. Because the first record that should have been made, the one the house itself might have provided, was never preserved. The chest of drawers was never finished. No one knows where it is. Every case we cover here ends the same way, not with a verdict, not with a sentence, but with a name that deserves to be remembered longer than the headlines that carried it. If this story stayed with you, that matters. It means you were paying attention not just to what happened, but to how it was allowed to happen. If you found value in this documentary, a like and a subscription helps this channel continue doing exactly this, slowing down, going deeper, and refusing to let the institutional silences go unnamed. And if there's a case you believe deserves this kind of scrutiny, a fracture that hasn't been examined, leave it in the comments. We read them. They shape what comes next. Fracture lines. Where the system meets the truth it tried to file away.